Hello everyone, my name is Elki Togala,
And my name is Iftadi Dustiawan.
and today we're going to talk about provide research article about using Unocards in geography education. Septar, you won't believe the research paper I stumbled upon. It's about a paper using Unocards to teach geography in high school. Seriously, Unocards.
You know cards? For geography,
Yes,
that sounds unconventionally but intriguing. What the story tell? Why did they even think of that?
well, the researchers were trying to tackle a real problem at SMR Christian 1 Metro. Apparently, students there found geography quite difficult. Their learning outcomes were pretty low, and a significant number weren't meeting the criteria minimum, which was set at 70 for the primarily student.
Low outcomes, huh? Any idea why? What the teaching just not clicking? Or was the subject matter itself the main hurdle?
It seems like a mix of things. The paper mentioned that the allocation for teaching time was only 2 hours per week, which isn't it a lot given the amount of material students needed to master. Plus, there was a shortage of good learning media like textbooks, and it sounds like students were a bit too passive, relying heavily on the teacher, and some were even getting sleepy in class. The primarily student saw it that actually 21% of students were actually achieving that KKM of 70.
Only 21%? Wow, that's quite low. So they thinks it up.
Exactly. The main goal was to produce a learning media. These cards that could increase student motivation and their learning results. Then they want to analyze how effective these cards actually were in the classroom. They believe that using a visual medium like cards, which are familiar and game-like, could make learning more engaging and fun. The cards they developed were specifically 10 times 10 cm piece of paper.
Interesting. So how did they go about developing this geography cards? Did they just slap some maps on them?
Not quite. It was formal research and development project. They used a development designed by Dick and Carey. This involved several stages, starting with a needs assessment to figure out what the students actually needed. Then they planned and developed a primarily form of the product. After that, the cards were evaluated by material experts and instructional media experts, and they also did limited trials with students.
So expert validations and student feedback were part of the process. That's good. How did they structure the actual research to test effectivities? Did they have a control group?
Yes, they did. For the main effectiveness testing, they had an experimental group that used the Uno cards, media, and a control group that learned which conventional method, which the paper says was PowerPoint based. They used multiple choice tests to measure learning achievement. The data collection happened before and after the intervention, so pre-test and post-test for both groups.
Pre-test, post-test, experimental, and control. sound like a cool design. What's about the data analysis? Now, did they determine if the Uno cards were truly more effective?
They analyzed the gain score, the difference between the pretest and post-test results for both groups. Before running comparative statistics, they performed pre-switch tests like normality and homogeneity. Tests using SPSS software. If the data was normal and homogeneous, they used a test for related samples to compare the groups. They also look at the percentage of students who exceed the minimal competency, which for the specific research study was set at 75. The effectiveness was also judged on whether at least 65 of students achieved this minimum capacity.
Okay, so they had clear benchmarks of success. What were the ultimate findings? Did the Uno cards live up to hype?
It seems so. The research concluded that Uno card media was effective in improving student achievement. There was a significant improvement in learning outcomes, and an increased number of students successfully completed the minimum capacity in the experimental group. The paper explicitly states that the learning in the experimental class using the geography Uno cards was more effective than the control classes using PowerPoint. The product itself was also deemed very good and very suitable by experts and students after evaluation and trials. It seems so. The research concluded that UnoCard media was effective in improving student achievement. There was a significant improvement in learning outcomes, and an increased number of students successfully completed minimum capacity in the experimental group. The paper explicitly states that the learning in the experimental group class using the geography Uno cards was more effective than the control class using PowerPoint. The product itself was also deemed very good and very suitable by experts and students after evaluation and trials.
That's a positive outcomes. It's good to see practical solutions being developed and tested rigorously. The teaching this approach to any broader educational theories.
Yes, they did. The development of the Uno cards was based on constructive approach to learning, which emphasizes that the learner must be active in constructing their own knowledge. The idea in the student using the cards are actively engaging, thinking, and even collaborating, rather than just passively receiving information. They also mentioned Gagne's cognitive theory, suggesting that playing with the Uno cards improves information processing. Students receive information from the card image and interaction, process it, and this leads to learn outcomes. And it wasn't just the cards in isolation. The learning was combined with methods like comparative learning and a problem-solving approach. All students centered.
So it's not just about playing a game, but how that game facilitates active learning and information processing supported by other pedagogical strategies. That makes a lot of sense. It sounds like a well thought out invention.
Definitely, and the study even suggested that the geography Uno cards all light or visible and appropriate. For use in high school geography lesson, specifically at SM Artisan 1 Metro, it's a great example of how traditional. So that's all for me and Septa. See you again and goodbye.